Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 7th episode of the ProShip ParcelCast. Today, we'll be talking about the top pitfalls to avoid during new technology implementations with Josh Mayer of Summit Advisory Team. My name is Justin Cramer. I'm the co-founder of ProShip Multi-Carrier Shipping Software, and I'm here today with Josh Mayer, the managing partner and founder at Summit Advisory Team. Josh, would you like to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about today's topic?
Yeah, hey Justin, great to be here. Always happy to hang out with you as well. And I can't, first of all, it's hard to believe it's been almost a year since we presented together at your Pros Who Know event. Great to catch up, and I know that your 2021 event's coming up, so looking forward to that. Yeah, thanks for the intro. So like you said, I'm Josh Mayer, founder and a managing partner at Summit Advisory Team. At a high level, we're a consulting firm that helps clients solve omnichannel and supply chain operational problems. So sometimes this is as simple as looking at a business process and looking for ways to improve those. And sometimes it means implementing new technology, which I know we want to touch on today. But just a really quick call out. So I think as Summit, one of the things that really sets us apart is that our team has spent most of our career on the client side. So myself, as an example, spent over 10 years at Kohl's department stores and then Belk, running omnichannel and supply chain operations. So I think that is a really important perspective to have when you're on the consulting side. And we'll touch on more of that today. And Justin, I know, actually going back to Kohl's, that's where I had the privilege to meet you, sitting in one of the conference rooms, right, implementing ProShip. Couldn't tell you the DC, but one of the big box DCs.
To clarify to our audience, one of the primary services you provide is program managers, right?
Yes. Yeah. So one of our core competencies is program management. And going back to, what sets us apart, I think our offering is unique in the sense that our program managers are people that have not only understand the technology, but have run the business. So you get a blend of not only the leadership you would need to run a program, but also someone who can has the domain knowledge to ask the right questions about, business capabilities, functionalities, even some of the button pushing that might occur more technically. So that has been a really unique, like I said, that's a really unique skill set, a unique blend of different skills that we absolutely is one of our core competencies at Summit.
Excellent. And our goal today is to cover 3 of the pitfalls someone like your advisors would help somebody to avoid. So let's jump right into it. Let's go ahead and look at the first pitfall, which is underestimating the implementation effort itself. Can you talk to us about that process of implementation for a new logistics initiative and how this pitfall comes into play?
Yeah, absolutely. As you stated, yeah, number one pitfall that we see when we're working with clients across the board is just underestimating the implementation effort, really to run a new program. And I want to be really clear. So notice I said program, not project. We can do a separate podcast on why a project's not a program. However, we tend to call these big initiatives, and I would classify a ProShip implementation as one of these, something that spans business teams, business operations, and as nature, by nature of that, spans technology stacks. Something
exactly.
That's highly
exactly. One of the things that our customers know is that when you are implementing something the size of ProShip, you might be touching your e-commerce suite, your OMS, your WMS, your ERP, and possibly even physical items within the warehouse itself to set up to take advantage of all these changes you're making through your entire enterprise software stack.
Yeah, 100% agree. So that's a great visual for people to have when we say program. That's what we mean. But going back to again, underestimating the effort. I think anytime you're introducing a new technology, it's just that, right? It's new. And I think regardless of the amount of homework you do, so Justin, you've been in just a few sales cycles, you've been through just a few RFP processes, right? there's some really great structure you can put around that. It doesn't change the fact that the people pushing the buttons, it's still a new technology for them to some degree. So um, that's why that's the number one pitfall that we see. I think, digging slightly deeper, I think it isn't necessarily the new technology. So the new technology in a silo works great. The client's tech stack can work great. It's a lot of the times it's the interaction between the two where we see mishaps occur or just underestimating what data needs to be passed back and forth. And a great example of this I wanted to touch on with you, Justin, is that comes to mind is international shipping, right? So if I were to ask you, hey, Justin, does ProShip support international shipping?
I would respond with a series of questions, all leading towards a yes, but there would probably be between 10 and 50 questions to be able to give you a qualified yes.
Exactly. So to that point, your questions are going to be geared around does the client have the data that we would need to produce in an international shipment, right? And that kind of interaction where there's these great business benefits, there's this great value out there. Yet it can be a very challenging thing for clients who have struggled with that in the past. Even with new technology, you'll struggle if you can't get the right information back and forth. So just an example of where we can see a specific use case and how you might underestimate some of the effort.
And I want to call out as well before we move deeper into this first pitfall, the difference between an external manager and an internal manager. And just from my own experience, I know I've worked with a lot of companies where that internal manager is just overbooked. They have 10 projects or more that they're working on. And of course, they're also susceptible to the fire of the day, so to speak. Could you reach a little more or give any more color to what I just mentioned there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I completely agree with you. And I think as Summit, we are going to act as the external program manager. That's, as we touched on earlier, that's one of our competencies. That's a role that we play for our clients on behalf of our clients. And to your point, that's one of the call outs that we would have in getting into ways to avoid this pitfall. Yes, internal teams are busy. They have many, many different tasks that especially if you've got really good people, they're not doing one thing, they're doing many things. And so the ability to focus typically isn't there. But hey, that's not to say it couldn't work. So if you have an internal rock star, we recommend pulling them out of their current role to dedicate to a program. But again, that's not easy to do either. So yeah, I would say you're spot on with that kind of ability to focus. That's really where that external program manager can come in and help.
In addition to that, they provide other values as well. Can you dig into some of those things? How does an external program manager allow a customer to really realize greater value?
Yeah, so I think just that aspect of having done it before is really key. So knowing which questions to ask, going back to our international shipping example, knowing what's required to do that and execute that successfully lets you get ahead of the curve. So, we've just found that has been a need in the marketplace, that people don't want generic program managers. They want someone who has done the program executed the program before and understands what to watch out for. So I think it's that blend of the domain expertise plus the ability to focus. And that just cuts into, I think the only other thing I'd say here is we call it a cross-functional impact analysis. That is definitely consultant speak. But basically, this is a series of interviews with business teams just to say, hey, we're fundamentally changing the way you ship product, right? Do you care about that? And trying to gather what all the impacts are across the organization. So leveraging those, that expertise to flesh out all the possible impacts down the road.
Well, and wouldn't you say that your team, I mean, they've been around, they've seen that. So when it comes to things like unplanned dependencies or rapid changes, right, they've seen that before, and they can help guide a company through that.
Exactly. Yeah, having having the awareness to know when you encounter certain issues or certain types of problems through the implementation and what options others have used to solve those, I think is key. It all kind of cuts back to the speed of decision, that speed to value of being able to execute.
Excellent. Moving on to our second pitfall. Business value is the primary driver for most company initiatives. Let's talk about how, during a normal business process, our listeners might lose sight of the end goal. Can you tell us where to start with something like this?
Yeah, and this is such a common pitfall. It can be crazy, but I think for this one, let's tailor our conversation to parcel shipping. I think so. One of the common main business value drivers we see with, say, an implementation of ProShip is the ability to rate shop. So basically compare shipping costs across services, select the best service that meets, all of your needs. That could be cost, quality, speed, but that's a highly desirable thing. I mean, who doesn't want that, right, Justin? So, but that's like step 54 of the implementation. And what people fail to realize is that, there are steps along the way. Step 20 of 54 might just be printing your first FedEx label, right? Sending your first trailer with a new carrier. And that's where we tend to see the people get stuck. We get into it, we're not releasing in an agile way, and we flounder with, hey, what are the dependencies? How do we get there? And ultimately all that's doing is you've lost sight of that major milestone in this example being the rate shopping.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier in the conversation about the pros who know conversations that we had last year, and in that example, I think you've got a parallel here, because that company didn't replace everything. They weren't replacing their point of sale and their WMS. They were just focusing on ProShip, on implementing a new back-end shipping software to ensure that nothing else changed, and that I would say that minimized their risk while increasing the amount of flexibility that we had and minimizing the impact to their actual users, both in store as well as in their warehouses. And I might have said originally with that one, maybe doing both at the same time was a bit of a reach, but it went quite well because we still had that scope narrowed so well.
Yeah, agreed. And I think you bring up a great point, which is, although I think those new capabilities seem pretty elaborate, keeping things simple. So simplifying the problem a lot of times is one of the ways to avoid this pitfall. And going back to our rate shopping example, you just need 2 services to rate shop. So you don't need 100. I know a lot of times we want these really complex strategies upon go live, but finding ways to keep it simple, yet getting some of that value is really key.
Yeah, simple is not easy, and making simple easy requires the knowledge to do it. So let's say we've done an MVP. We're starting to realize value. As we ramp up, do we have additional compounded concerns? What are some factors that drive that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it comes back to the dependencies. I think not understanding how what it takes to get from step 1 to step 54 in the right manner is really where we can see a lot of the challenge and where people tend to fall into this pitfall. So I think trying to keep that clear line of sight. A lot of times these days, clients are thinking about reducing risk, getting new capabilities implemented before they hit their peak volume, whether that be during the traditional holidays or some other time. I think keeping that line of sight and then really making sure that your teams understand those dependencies is key. So if we're running the program on your behalf, that's something we talk about daily. That's something that we have certain frameworks we can use, but basically highlighting the major milestone along with kind of the key risk points along the way is key.
So you mentioned daily communication. Sounds like all the development everybody's been doing now, kind of an agile approach with Would that be something you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think most of our clients are moving. If they're not agile already, they're moving towards that. We love to see that. Uh, I think it's a great way to keep in touch, avoid a lot of the things that we've talked about today, but more importantly, just get answers to questions. I think 80% of the questions just need the right level of focus and communication, and that's some of the inherent value you get when you can dedicate someone to a program.
Our third pitfall is forgetting about business intelligence and analytics. Can you tell us a little bit about BI and analytics? Let's start with just a quick problem introduction.
Sure, absolutely. So I'd say pitfall number 3 is my favorite, only because so again, going back to who we are, having run analytics teams before, I feel for teams when they don't have the right data. So this pitfall is all about, hey, we've implemented these great, this set of great new capabilities, probably means some new technology, and we've forgotten about where that data needs to go in order to create BI reports and analytics. And really quickly, orientation for the group. Reports are great. I think reports are standard sets of information that can be emailed or looked at as needed, but they're just that. They're just data on a page. And to us, we're talking more about BI. So what are the insights we need to run the business? What are the actions we take? And how do we do that? So inherently, we're talking about all of those things, but I think getting to that speed to insight is really what this pitfall is all about. And a lot of times that means consolidating data. So I think for us, the problem statement is we're doing this great new great new program, implementing new capabilities, and we've forgotten about how to get some of the new data associated with those capabilities into an enterprise data warehouse or somewhere that we can consolidate it.
Well, how much because we talked earlier about MVP and starting with where you get the most value. I feel that there's a corollary here because a lot of customers are just like, data. I want all the data, but they have no idea what to do with the data. They expect that the analytics and the insights are just going to pop out of that data automatically. So can you talk a little bit about quality data, what data you might want, and how experience has helped some advisory team actually help select the data that will be most valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great call out, great corollary. But you're absolutely right. So just because going back to the program, just because you actually get the raw data into your data warehouse, great, that's step 1. So now I've got all this new data. What do I do with it? And as Summit, in the past, we've offered consulting services around what are the metrics I need to go define, how do I calculate them, how do I evaluate my performance based on the values I see, and that's been great. But we've actually created our own standalone offering, which we've branded as Elevate, which is extremely creative, I know. But basically, it sets out to solve this problem. So we've got a pre-constructed data platform that exists. We've built out this suite of insights across the omni-channel and supply chain domain. So parcel visibility is a great example. And all we need to do is plug in the client's raw data in order to get those insights. So going back to kind of that speed to value, that's really our the value proposition with Elevate. But I think to your point, whether it's Elevate or something you've built internally, that's a program in itself, trying to understand what to go measure, how to measure it, how frequently to do it, and it takes a lot of time from the team.
Yeah, and with your team having years and years of experience, I've always felt that though we like to say nowadays that it's report, which is just raw data, BI, which is canned analytics and analytics. The reality is that the BI follows the analytics. It follows what people are thinking about. So your ability to create whether it's inside somebody's, let's say they've got a Microsoft BI or a Tableau or something like that. It's the knowledge that you guys have put together that should inform what those business analytics are to help drive the company on a day-to-day basis when one of your team members is not actually doing those analytics for them. Excellent.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think to that point, we've tried to take what we've learned through consulting and through helping other clients solve similar problems and build that into Elevate so that it's ready for use. So exactly, kind of all stemming back to getting, speed to your point, insights, which is step 10 in the journey and can take a lot of time if you don't have that skill set.
And I think the last thing that I want to talk about is about that difference between reporting, and you mentioned a data lake, a data repository.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think of when I think of a data repository is the fact that it spans the various enterprise systems within that enterprise software stack. So it might have data from the e-commerce suite, from the OMS, from the ERPs, the various WMSs, and if you have a very large organization, it may span multiple shipping systems, ERPs, right. WMSs, point of sales, all that information. Could you talk to our audience a little bit about that? Are you seeing a lot of that by compressing all of that data into one spot? Are you getting a bigger picture or anything like that?
Yeah, that is absolutely the way to go. And I think for a number of reasons, including just simply that with some of the new cloud technologies, it's become easier to set those up. So regardless of your provider, whether that be Amazon, Oracle, Google, there's a great stack that supports, exactly what you're saying, which is we want to stream the raw data, consolidate all of that in a data lake or something, in a set of databases or tables, so that we can consolidate it. Because to your point, if you're trying to answer a question such as what's my customer order to delivery performance, well, you can't answer that in a single source of information. So I need to know when that order was placed. I need to know which warehouse or fulfillment location that was sent to, how long it took them to process, when the carrier got it, when it injected in the carrier network, and when finally it delivered. And that's probably 3 to 5 sets of modern applications to stitch together the insight. So yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's some of the reason that we consider BI its own program, kind of mini program in each of these implementations. But it's also the exact use case of Elevate, where we're trying to grab and consolidate data from anywhere so we can create those more holistic insights.
So you made me think of basically a wildcard question. Something just came out of nowhere here. Your discussion on BI is very real time.
Yes.
And kind of like BI that's driving day-to-day or hour-to-hour activities. And there's also BI and analytics that you may want to look back over a larger period of time, over weeks, months, or even years. Do you have any insights on why you might want to do one way and the other way? Or is this more about just driving more real-time BI at this point in time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, to your point, different use cases. So I think getting the historical data, whether, regardless of where the data was created, everyone wants to understand, season over season, year over year performance. Hey, I added a new carrier. How does that change things? So there's definitely some events over time that, going back to the data lake concept, you want to pull in as much historical as you can. However, yeah, I think as part of our programs and implementation, we are very focused on getting to the business value that we stated, which means you need that real-time visibility. I need to know if things are wrong. I need to know that today. I need to know that in near real time, and I want to be able to solve that in near real time. So different use cases, both important, and yeah, we're trying to go out and solve both.
Excellent. All right, so let's move into our final phase. I know we talked about a lot of things in the last 30 minutes or so. Is there anything else you want to bring up to our listeners? Anything about Summit, anything about BI, anything about the pitfalls that we've talked about, or maybe a pitfall we might not have spoken about?
We could talk pitfalls all day, I think. No, I think, like I said, I appreciate you having me on. The only thing I'll say is, again, kind of the shameless self-promotion with Summit and Elevate. we understand that there's incremental costs associated with working with either an external program manager or a new data product that might help in certain ways. And so we've created more of a free value assessment. So essentially we'll help clients justify not only the program, so let's say they're considering an implementation of ProShip, we'll help them think through that, as well as layer in the costs of, an external program manager and possibly Elevate to say, hey, does this actually make sense? And I'll tell you, given the domain that you're in with ProShip, when it comes to parcel shipping, really being the #1 operating expense, a lot of times it can make sense, and it does make sense just because literally you're touching every package that you send. So from a cost perspective, there's a lot of opportunities there.
Excellent. Actually, yeah, there's a lot of advice that needs to happen, especially I'm assuming in the last year you guys have gotten a lot of new questions, especially questions about capacity, things of that nature. I think that's the topic of 2020 was capacity. So I'm sure that you guys have got a lot of new answers and new insights on that. And I do want to make sure that our listeners understand that Summit works with all different types of shipping software out there, whether you're shipping sub 1,000 packages a day, all the way up to where ProShip excels in the thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of packages a day. Obviously, that there's more revenue to impact there, so we see one another a little bit more frequently at that high end.
Sure. Yeah. How about for you, Justin? I'll flip the table on and the question back to you. Is there anything you want to call out pitfall wise or specific?
Well, I want to reinforce something. I want to reinforce one of the values of having a dedicated, whether internal or external, program manager. And that really is, I like to call it the trainer mentality, right? If you book a session with a trainer, if you're trying to get in shape or get in better shape or something like that, you're more likely to appear, right? Whereas if you just say, hey, I'm going to work out at 9 o'clock, that gets pushed to 9:30, it gets pushed, right? As soon as you commit resources to an external individual, you have a tendency to treat that better. And we've seen that in business, right? We've seen that when over the last 20 years as we've gone in and seen companies who used to write their own shipping software. In the early 2000s, that was pretty popular. They would maintain their own compliancy, but because it was built in-house, it got pushed. Oh, we don't have to make that label change this year. We don't have to change. We don't have to add that service level. And then 5 years after that, because of that inability to do everything at once, right? All the other things is necessary to run your business and keep things compliant. Those internally supported items, they kind of drifted and they were no longer in compliance. And for less than the cost it would take for them to upgrade, they put in solutions like ProShip or others, right? And so to me, thinking of it like that trainer aspect really helps, especially if this is a #1 item for you. And as you mentioned, logistics spend is huge, especially in the last 18 months. Logistics spends have just been critical to all of our customers. So if you're going to get serious, you either need to have a dedicated internal resource or hire a dedicated external resource. And of course, one that has domain expertise is a clear win for everybody. So let's go ahead and wrap up here. Let me do the closing remarks here. So if you want to learn more, please visit us at summitadvisoryteam.com or proshipinc.com. Thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, just a reminder that you can reach us at sales@proshipinc.com or 800-353-7774. We hope you join us in April for a discussion about hazmat shipping and dangerous goods with one of ProShip technology partners, Label Master. Thank you, everybody.